Disgraced journalist, Twitter Files contributor, and right-wing apologist Matt Taibbi publicly challenged progressive commentator Mehdi Hasan to a debate. It happened, and then Taibbi unraveled across a span of 25 consecutive minutes. Intrigued? Then click that like and subscribe, and enjoy the video. All right, folks, I know I said a couple of weeks ago that hopefully we were done talking about the Twitter Files, and I wish that were true, but I can't help but talk about this because this is probably my favorite Twitter Files related piece of news. So, a couple of weeks ago, Matt Taibbi, who was one of the big Twitter Files contributors, probably the most prominent one, publicly challenged Mehdi Hasan, a progressive political commentator on MSNBC/Peacock, to a debate. Here's what happened. Basically, Mehdi Hasan tweeted in response to censorship that Twitter was facilitating on behalf of the Modi government in India. And Mehdi Hasan sarcastically tweeted, I'm sure Matt Taibbi is all over this, since Matt Taibbi is an independent, nonpartisan journalist who cares about censorship and free speech, and he spent so much time devoted to the Twitter Files, I'm sure that he will be reporting about the fact that Twitter is aiding in the censorship of an entire country at the behest of a right-wing government. Taibbi responded, he took the bait. He said, why don't you invite me on your show to talk about it since you're so absolutely sure of what I'll say? And of course, I don't know if Mehdi Hasan assumed that Taibbi would take the bait, but of course Hasan, who is an accomplished and aggressive debater, pounced on it. He said, absolutely. We'll work it out. We'll see you next week. So the debate happened, and it was about 30 minutes long, if you count the 4 or 5 minute intro that Hasan did in terms of setting the stage, describing Taibbi's journalistic background, which, by the way, there was a time when Matt Taibbi was a hella revered journalist. He, he covered the 2008 financial crisis. He was a Rolling Stones reporter. He's a skilled writer. But somewhere along the way, he traded his integrity and his journalistic bona fides for, I don't know, right-wing apologia, conspiracy theory, and selective fixation on relative non-issues. Well, the debate happened, and I want to play some clips from it. I don't know what the copyright situation is, so I don't want to play the whole thing, but there are like 4 or 5 major clips that I want to play and go over them, and so let's jump into it.
But do your files provide evidence of government censorship? I don't think so. Let's just take the very first example you cited in the very first thread, which went mad viral. You wrote, by 2020, requests from connected actors to delete tweets were routine. One executive would write to another, more to review from the Biden team. The reply would come back, handled. Now, that sounds bad, but aside from the fact that the Biden team was not the government at the time, it turns out that at least 3, maybe 4 of those 5 tweet URLs that you linked to, that they link back to non-consensual nude images of Hunter Biden. Why was it wrong, Matt, for the Biden campaign, not the government at the time, to ask Twitter to enforce its own terms of service against people basically posting revenge porn? Do you understand why people question your credibility on this whole project when you omit such crucial context right from the get-go?
First of all, the reason that's important is because the ordinary person can't just call up Twitter and have something taken off Twitter. If you put something nasty about me on Twitter, I can't just call up Twitter and talk to the government liaison, whose name I won't mention on the air, and say, hey, can you take care of this? And have them take care of that. That doesn't work for the ordinary person. The Biden campaign could do it. Donald Trump could do it. But I can't do it. Can you do it? I don't think so.
You didn't answer my question. Why didn't you tell us what were in the URLs? Because it sounds much worse than it is. When you discovered that actually it was simply a violation of Twitter's terms of service, that these were nude, non-consensual images of Hunter Biden, why not mention that? Did you not know? In which case, no. That's kind of incompetent. Or did you know and you were just hiding it from people?
Incompetent?
I mean, if you didn't know, if you put up
MSNBC. My
did
God,
you know
6 consecutive years of just screw-ups on the Russia story.
Well, that was predictable. If we're going to do predictable. Can you answer the question? Did you know what was in the URLs when you posted them?
I know what was in the URLs.
Why didn't you tell us?
I don't need to.
Because it's relevant. You don't think it's relevant that it's a violation of Twitter's terms of service to have nude pictures of Hunter Biden up?
Look, every time they make a request to Twitter, they're doing what you're arguing. They're making the argument that, oh, we're not actually asking. This isn't censoring. This is just the government.
So, and this particular section goes on a bit, but I think this covers the basics. So, Mehdi Hasan did this beautifully. Number one, he reminded Matt Taibbi that, hey, in your Twitter Files contributions, you focus overwhelmingly on now President Biden, but even before he was president, when he was simply a private citizen running for office. Now, to be sure, Joe Biden even then was powerful and well-connected, but he was not the government. The government was Donald Trump, a Republican, the sitting president of the United States, far more powerful and far more insidious in terms of influence, right? So if your concern is about government overreach, then during the 2020 presidential election, you should have been exclusively focused on Donald Trump and the Republican Party since they were the ones in power, but you didn't. So Mehdi Hasan correctly pointed that out. You're moving the goalposts. You say you're concerned about government censorship, and yet, aside from a couple of throwaway lines, you focus exclusively on Joe Biden, who was not the government, and he was simply running for office. And by the way, the examples that you exclusively focus on about tweets that they asked Twitter to take down, number one, those were a clear violation of Twitter's policy, so they were fair game, number one. Number two, not only were they violations of Twitter's user policies, in terms of their contents, they were non-consensual pornographic images of Joe Biden's son. So I think most sane people would agree that if anybody was going to make a request of a social media company to take shit down, it would probably be non-consensual pornographic images of their children. And Matt Taibbi says, well, listen, it doesn't matter. The content doesn't matter. The content doesn't matter. The fact that he made the request is what mattered. Because he says, Matt Taibbi says, because you or I couldn't make that request. Well, number one, we don't know that's true. Mehdi Hasan is a powerful, influential journalist. As a matter of fact, so is Matt Taibbi, who actually has a direct line to Elon Musk. More on that later. So number one, I reject the premise that he couldn't make that request. But even if he couldn't make that request, even if the normal average citizen couldn't make that direct request, that's about power and privilege. To be sure, even candidate Joe Biden is powerful and privileged. But again, the content of the request matters because it was a perfectly valid request to make. It was a perfectly reasonable request to make, and they made it in a perfectly reasonable way. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't unethical what they asked Twitter to do and how they asked Twitter to do it. And Matt Taibbi glosses over that when challenged. Well, the content doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that it was non-consensual pornographic images. It doesn't matter that Joe Biden wasn't in the government. So Mehdi Hasan was correct to point that out, and Matt Taibbi's protestations are very, very weak here. It does look like he actively concealed the content of the images because he would know, or the content of the posts that the Biden campaign asked Twitter to take down, because he knew that reasonable people on both sides of the aisle would be like, that makes sense. That makes sense that Joe Biden would ask Twitter to take this shit down. It wasn't politically inconvenient things. It was pornographic, non-consensual dick pics of his son. Pretty reasonable request. So, with that in mind, let's move on to the next one.
Has said one of the greatest forms of censorship in the media is censorship by omission. You've heard that quote. There's a lot of omission in the Twitter files. A lot you and your colleagues don't tell us. You mentioned in passing, for example, in your very first thread that the Trump White House made requests of Twitter too, i.e. the actual government, not the Biden campaign. But you didn't tell us what those Trump requests were. It took an actual Twitter whistleblower. Well, it took an actual Twitter whistleblower in front of Congress to reveal that Trump once demanded Twitter take down a mean tweet about him from the model Chrissy Teigen. Yet you didn't mention that in any of your Twitter files posts.
Because I didn't have that story. I don't have it.
Doesn't that tell you something, that you had the Biden story and not the Trump story, that Elon Musk was giving you one side of the story? No,
you don't understand. First of all, that first batch of files resulted in the firing of Twitter's general counsel. We were looking at something on a very short time frame, but we didn't have it. I went out of my way to report that fact. I was the first person who reported that Donald Trump made requests and had them honored on Twitter.
But you outlined which ones the Biden team did without giving full context, but you didn't outline which ones. Well, maybe you should ask yourself why it is you didn't have it. Let me ask you this. A lot of your own Twitter files reporting shows top Twitter employees struggling.
Okay, so that one also, that's very important. It kind of piggybacks off the previous point. Donald Trump was the sitting president of the United States at the time of the first batch of Twitter files in terms of the timeline, right? In terms of the timeline covered pertaining to the 2020 election, the Hunter Biden laptop story, all these things. Donald Trump, not Joe Biden, was the sitting president of the United States. Donald Trump, not Joe Biden, was the head of the United States government. So if Matt Taibbi's point is that there was an inappropriate relationship between the United States government or United States government actors and Twitter and social media companies, then again, Mehdi Hasan's point is valid. You should have been either exclusively, entirely focused on Donald Trump and the Republican Party, since they were the ones in power, or at least predominantly. And instead, what you do is you exclusively focus on a guy who at the time was not a member of government, let alone the head of government, And Matt Taibbi said, well, give me credit. I at least reported that Donald Trump and the Trump White House and members of the Republican Party made requests of Twitter to censor and suppress things. I at least acknowledge it. Sure, I didn't focus on it, and I didn't seek the information out, but I at least was aware of it, and I acknowledged it. You don't get points for that, buddy. You're selectively focused, and you're not only selectively focused, you're selectively focused on the wrong things. And as Mehdi Hasan points out, well, then maybe you should ask yourself when Taibbi says, well, I didn't know about that specific instance about, Donald Trump trying to get Twitter to take down the tweet of Chrissy Teigen, a celebrity who simply insulted him, right? Now, that's an abuse of power, right? We know from Twitter employees that happened because they testified as such under oath. And as Mehdi Hasan would later say, if you have evidence to contradict them, fair enough, but otherwise probably should assume that what they said under oath is valid. If you didn't know anything about that story, maybe you should ask yourself, why didn't I? Why didn't I get this information from Elon Musk? Why didn't Elon Musk, if he's such an impartial, independent, nonpartisan arbiter of free speech, why didn't Elon Musk give me more information about the times that the right wing and the Republican Party and Republican government actors and Donald Trump, who again was the head of the government, the president of the United States, most powerful man in the world, when he attempted to use his power and authority and bully pulpit to silence people in speech he didn't like? Why didn't Elon Musk give you that information? Could it be because he is partisan and he does have an agenda and he's not an impartial defender of free speech? And why are you, as a nonpartisan independent journalist, why aren't you getting that information from Elon Musk? Hey, Elon, you're giving me a lot of information about the Democrats and Joe Biden. And thank you for that, by the way. But Donald Trump was the sitting president at the time, so he deserves much more of our focus than a guy who's not the president and not a government agent. So what do you have on Donald Trump and the government at the time? What do you have on them? Can you give me more information on that? But Taibbi didn't do that because he's a hack. And Mehdi Hasan was correct to point that out. So let's move on to another example.
State that I think is being painted by Jim Jordan. By the way, you said about factual inaccuracies, Matt. Let's talk factual inaccuracies. Stanford. You talk a lot about the Election Integrity Project in the Twitter files, which Stanford and the University of Washington founded to monitor attacks on our elections. And you say some stuff about them that a lot of your critics say is not true, and that affects your credibility. You said the EIP was founded in response to the government dropping its proposal for a disinformation government. Well, there you are. We're quoting you on screen. It wasn't. It was formed 2 years earlier. You suggest it was government funded, even though during the 2020 election that you're covering, it wasn't. You say they labeled 22 million tweets as misinformation in the run-up to the 2020 vote. They didn't. They flagged 3,000 election misinformation tweets for labeling, so you were only 21,997,000 off. And you also claim the EIP was... Let me finish the question. You can come back in. You also claim the EIP was partnered with the government cybersecurity and infrastructure agency, CISA, to censor Twitter. But you mix up CISA, CISA, a Homeland Security Agency, with the Center for Internet Security, the CIS, which is a non-profit. In fact, you added an A to CIS. I think people can see it there in brackets to make that false claim. It's just error after error, Matt, on just this one topic.
Error. But the other ones aren't. The 22 million number came from their own report?
Yeah, it came from a report in March. Do you know what the 22 million number is, Matt? Can you tell me? Because we checked. 22 million is the number of tweets about election misinformation that they just mapped. How many tweets were they? The ones they actually flagged to Twitter before the election, 22 million came after the election. It wasn't in the run-up. They flagged 3,000. So you were off by 21,997,000. They
said a lot of things. I stand by my story.
You stand.
Okay. So this one's a big one too. And there was actually, after this debate, some back and forth on this 22 million figure. So to Taibbi's credit, he does concede that at least a couple of these were factual errors, reporting errors. And he did, after the debate, correct them. But he stands by, as he says, the 22 million figure, even though Mehdi Hasan says, actually, no, the figure was 3,000. By the way, I'm still in the final stages of, again, a pretty wicked sinus infection, so please bear with me. I apologize for the coughing. But he stands by the dispute between this non-government actor flagging supposedly 22 million tweets, trying to get 22 million tweets silenced. And Mehdi Hasan says, no, actually, before the election, they only flagged 3,000, which may seem like a lot to you. Nowhere near as much as 22 million. Literal orders of magnitude separating these two figures. Well, again, they had a back and forth post-debate. And it turns out the representatives on behalf of the group that supposedly flagged these tweets, they did say, no, it was only 3,000. The 22 million figure refers to, the 3,000 figure refers to misinformation and disinformation pertaining to the election that this group flagged to Twitter, said, hey, this seems like misinformation, disinformation, you may want to take a look at it. 22 million refers to basically the number of tweets that regurgitated that information, but the agency involved didn't go and try to tag all 22 million tweets or report them, right? They tagged the initial 3,000 pre-election. And then when they continued to investigate and map the trajectory of this disinformation, they found after the election that at least 22 million tweets reflected the disinformation of the initial 3,000 tweets that they flagged. This is a meaningful, substantive difference, and Matt Taibbi is wrong to stand his ground on this. He's simply factually wrong. He's conflating two very different numbers, which is very dishonest. So let's go on to the next clip.
What's interesting about Elon Musk is that we checked. You've tweeted over 30 times about Musk since he announced he was going to buy Twitter last April, and not a word of criticism about him in any of those 30-plus tweets. Musk is a billionaire who's been found to have violated labor laws multiple times, including in the past few days. He's attacked labor unions, reportedly fired employees on a whim, slammed the idea of a wealth tax, told his millions of followers to vote Republican last year, and in response to a right-wing coup against Bolivian leftist president Evo Morales, he tweeted, "We'll coup whoever we want." And yet you've been silent on all of that. How did you go, Matt, from being the scourge of Wall Street, the man who called Goldman Sachs the vampire squid, to being unwilling to say anything critical at all about this right-wing reactionary anti-union billionaire?
Hello? Am I still on?
Yes, you're still on. I'm just wondering how come you've never criticized Musk despite all that?
Look, so I like Elon Musk. I met him. This is part of the calculation when you do one of these stories. Are they going to give you information that's going to make you look stupid? Do you think their motives are sincere about doing X or Y? And I didn't. I thought. I mean, I did. I thought his motives were sincere about the Twitter files, and I admired them. I think he did a tremendous public service in opening the files up. But that doesn't mean I have to agree with him about everything. And
I agree with you, but you never disagree with him. You've gone silent. People would say that's access journalism. No, I haven't reported anything that limits my ability to talk about Elon Musk. So will you criticize him today for banning journalists, for working with Modi government to shut down speech, for being anti-union? You can go for it. I'll give you as much time as you like. Would you like to criticize Musk now?
No, I don't particularly want to. Look, I didn't criticize him really before, and I think that what the Twitter files are is a step in the right direction.
But it's the same Twitter that he's running right now.
I disagree with him. If you want to ask, I think.
Understood, Matt. Well, I'll ask you a specific one.
No.
It's not in bad faith, Matt. Sorry. You say that Twitter. Hold on. Let me finish my question. You're saying that he's good for Twitter and good for speech. I'm saying he's using Twitter to help one of the most right-wing governments in the world censor speech. I will criticize that. Will you?
I have to look at the story first. I'm not looking at it now.
Hold on. I posted the story 2 weeks ago. You tweeted at me.
I don't watch the Mehdi Hassan show.
You do. Actually, you do, because you tweeted at me saying, invite me on the show and I'll tell you my views. Here you are. What is your view? There it is. There it is. Look. Yeah, and you said, look, we'll read your words. Why don't you invite me on your show to talk about it, since you're so absolutely sure of what I'll say? You're right. I'm not sure. What is your view on Musk working with Modi to censor speech?
That's what you ask about the particulars about it. But listen, this came up
Yeah, so that was ugly. That was pretty bad. All right. So, number one, again, perfectly legitimate question. Hey, listen, your claim to fame, Matt Taibbi, is that you were an independent, nonpartisan journalist who stuck it to the man, the power elite, members of government, members of the elite class, the bourgeois, people like that. You stuck it to Wall Street during the financial crisis. You called them the vampire squid of America. That was your claim to fame. That's how you establish your bona fides and your celebrity, such as it is, in the journalistic world. Elon Musk is a member of that class. And by the way, we have the receipts in terms of his unethical behavior, his right-wing reactionary views, his terrible politics, all these things. And yet you're awfully silent. If you're really a nonpartisan, independent agent who's pro free speech, who supports the working class, who is critical of the elite and the powerful, well, Elon Musk should be one of your primary targets, especially since he took ownership of Twitter. He's using Twitter in much the same way that you've criticized Twitter's previous owners for doing. He censors people he doesn't like. He bans journalists for reporting on things he doesn't like. He bans accounts for doing things that he doesn't like. He does all these things, and yet you are silent. And Matt Taibbi waffles. Well, just because I like Elon Musk, which, by the way, to me is an admission in and of itself, doesn't mean that I agree with him on everything. And Mehdi Hassan's point is, okay, I agree. Even if you like him, you can be critical of him, but you're not critical of him. So I'm inviting you right now. I've given you examples. Be critical of him. Prove your credibility, your independence, your nonpartisanship. Prove the fact that you don't look at him as some sort of journalistic patron to whom you owe loyalty. Criticize him for the legitimate things he deserves to be criticized for. And Taibbi won't do it. He will not do it. Which should be a huge, big red flag, glaring, 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 for anyone who is vaguely, supportive of Taibbi's journalistic credibility. It's like, bro, you won't even criticize him? This guy, who is clearly a highly imperfect actor who has said and done really stupid, censorious shit, and you won't criticize him? That's sus. That's very sus. And then, of course, the fact that, Mehdi Hasan asked him very specifically, hey, what about this thing, this very specific thing, the relationship between Elon Musk's Twitter and the Modi government that precipitated this entire debate? The one where I sarcastically baited you and you took the bait saying, well, just invite me on your show and ask me about it, bruh. What about that? Since that was the very specific instance which triggered this whole debate. And Taibbi's like, well, I don't know anything about it. And maybe he doesn't. But again, that should say something. Why don't you know anything about it? And why would you agree to have a debate about it and not look into it at all? Are you afraid of what you might find? Are you afraid of what you might find in terms of the relationship between Elon Musk's Twitter and the Modi government? What's that say? So anyway, great clip there. And then the final one comes here at the very end. So let's play it.
When people were invited to the House Un-American Activities Committee. I mean, this is the point, Matt. The context, we're out of time, Stanley, but the context is that the Republicans are banning books and threatening the press. Ron DeSantis is threatening to get rid of anonymous sources.
Again,
and
you're mentioning something that I didn't write about. How many things
I didn't say you
over
wrote about it. Well, exactly. That's the problem, that you seem to think the Democrats, not the Republicans, are a big threat to speech, and I just don't see it. I wish we had more time to get into that.
Democrats
but we spent a lot of time.
Are you crazy? I mean, you don't think the Democrats are a threat to speech? Have you been paying attention to
Yes, I think all politicians are a threat to speech. But in this country, if you think the Republican Party is not the biggest threat to speech, then I don't know what to say to you. Maybe you should log off a bit and go to Florida. We have to disagree on that. I think the black voter who was arrested in Florida, or the woman arrested for taking an abortion pill, might not say that Cat Turd 2 being de-amplified was the biggest story of the year. But we will have to leave it there, Matt. Thank you for appearing on the show.
What about your Hunter Biden story?
Appreciate it.
So yeah, that was brutal, guys. That really was. And that was a great point by Mehdi Hasan. He's like, look, and the great thing about Mehdi Hasan, if you watch the whole debate, which I encourage you to do so, Mehdi Hasan begins the debate by offering some olive branches. He's like, look, Matt Taibbi, we're going to disagree quite a bit. Here, let me offer you some points where I think we do agree. And he does. He criticizes Twitter. He criticizes the government. He offers, in good faith, points of consensus between he and Taibbi. And then he even ends it there when Taibbi's like, oh, you don't think the Democrats are a threat to free speech? Mehdi Hasan very unreservedly says, no, I do think Democrats are a threat to free speech. I think all politicians are a threat to free speech. However, there's a meaningful difference. They're not all equally a threat. We can recognize meaningful substantive differences between various political actors, various political parties. They're not all on an equal playing field, right? Kind of like crime. Is jaywalking a crime? Yes. Is robbery a crime? Yes. Is murder a crime? Yes. But simply because they're all crimes doesn't mean they're all equally criminal or that they're all equally bad. That's Mehdi Hasan's point. Listen, if you want to make the case that the Democratic Party and certain Democratic agents and certain agents or people on the left are a threat to free speech, there's probably ample evidence by which you can make that case. But to suggest that they are as bad as those on the right or the Republican Party, or let alone worse, that's insane. And it is insane. Because as he points out, you have the aggressively censorious acts of Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida, a very powerful, very popular member of the Republican Party, second only to Donald Trump. And he's using state power to do it. You have various red state legislatures and red state governors across the country using state power, not just the power of their cult of personality, not just their privilege and wealth, but state power to make it harder for trans people to get gender-affirming care, or making it, harder to teach history that is inconvenient to conservatives, right? You see that all the time. People who are wanting to ban, critical race theory or things like that, or talk about slavery, the effects of slavery, the moral failures of the Confederacy, the moral superiority of the Union, all these things, like the various bad nuances of United States history, our moral pitfalls along the way. That's censorship, right? And they're using state power to do it. So Mehdi Hasan makes a point here, and Matt Taibbi has completely lost the plot. As he says, you probably need to log off. If your worldview is that the left and Democrats are as bad, if not worse, than the right and Republicans when it comes to censorship and the abrogation of rights, you live in a terminally online world. And listen, to be sure, there is no doubt that if you stay on Twitter, if your worldview and your politics and your social commentary are informed exclusively by Twitter, plenty of examples of trigger-happy, overly censorious, random accounts on the left. But they are random accounts. They are not powerful. They are not privileged. Maybe in terms of the very niche, specific world of Twitter, they have a certain degree of outreach and certain degree of influence. But that doesn't translate to real world effects. Twitter is not the real world. Twitter is not the most popular social media site. Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all these things blow Twitter out of the water in terms of outreach and traffic and things like that. Twitter is quite literally, in terms of the big leagues, it's the smallest of the big leagues. And again, that's just the world of social media. Matt Taibbi is stepping over $1 for the sake of a nickel every time he just completely bypasses, right? He's like Neo in the Matrix, dodging, again, all the shit coming out of Governor DeSantis' Florida, all the stuff coming out of red states, all the stuff that the Trump administration was attempting to do, all the things that the Republican Party right now are attempting to do for the sake of people saying things on Twitter. So anyway, Mehdi Hasan crushed him. It was not even close. I can't believe Matt Taibbi thought for a second that this was going to go any other way than what it did. And this is further proof that, generally speaking, progressives and people on the left are infinitely better debaters than those on the right because the facts are on our side. So hopefully this will be a critical injury to Matt Taibbi's credibility. And certainly, since Twitter is what matters most, Matt Taibbi will probably be very sad to learn that this is all over Twitter. And from what I've seen, most people agree, yeah, Mehdi kicked your ass. Hey, you! Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, and I hope that you did, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. And if you absolutely hated the video, the best revenge for you is also to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. That'll teach me. If you want to share an opinion or share some feedback, go ahead and leave a comment, all right? 2023 is a year of change, hence the aggressive rebrand and commitment to new content. Inspired by my friends Luke Beasley and STV Philly, my personal goal for this channel is to hit 40,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So I'm hoping you'll do me a solid by spreading the word and the videos to potential fans and hate watchers alike. And in the meantime, we'll be pondering politics again with you very soon.